What if you were told you had 6 months left to live? Would that make you change the way you spend your time? Today we have cancer fighter Wade Lewis as he shares his resilient battle against brain cancer, defying the odds of survival. Wade's true story of gratitude, intentional living, and embracing failure as a lesson will inspire you to reevaluate life's priorities while offering tangible ways on how to live each day like it may be your last. Let's get started. Wade Lewis, thank you so much for being on the No Gray Areas podcast. We met each other a couple of years ago, and we've had coffee now, well just once, but we connected so much, we're like, we got to do this again. Like, I spent 10 minutes with you, and I'm like, I like this dude. But I wanted you here because you have an amazing story, and we're going to unpack a bunch of stuff. But we talk about on No Gray Areas the power and complexity of human choice. 4 years ago, something happened to you that changed the direction of your life. So unpack that, right?
Yes. So I'm on a flight coming back from Canada, Bombardier, my customer. And my wife texts and says, hey, I got us tickets to see Norm Macdonald, and then we're going to go see him, and then we're going to go stay in a hotel. Perfect. Go watch Norm. He killed it. It was great. And then at about 2 a.m. that evening, I had a grand mal seizure. And
what is that?
So that's
the
full.
I know what it is.
That's the full blown one. That's the one where you're shaking, can't do anything. Yes, very very scary, especially for my wife, who if you're not if you don't have seizures, then having your first seizure is quite a.
So you never had a seizure before?
I've never had a seizure in my life.
Then you have
and then the grand mal seizure where, so I'm stiff as a board. Just making these crazy things. My wife's shaking me. She's trying to figure out what's going on. And so I traveled a bunch for work. So we've been upgraded. So we got this 2-bedroom suite to where we actually, when she called the police, the ambulance, she couldn't even get to the door because I was seizing on the bed and trying to roll around and stuff like that. And so it was so far away, they almost had to beat the door in or whatever. And so it was
wow.
It was crazy. So then went straight there to the hospital and to see what the seizure was.
By the time you got to the hospital where you're still seizing, how long does that last?
So I lost a day. So that was Friday. The show was Friday. My first memories are on Sunday. So I lost an entire
That's gone.
day.
That whole day's gone?
Just gone.
Like nothing. Not
one thing.
So then you're at the hospital. They're trying to figure out what this is.
Yeah.
And did they find out right away?
So the first thing they told us, they say, we don't keep people overnight for seizures. So, don't worry about being here. And then all of a sudden I was there the next day. And there again. And so Sunday.
So you kind of knew something must be up.
So Sunday, I kind of start getting my wits about me. And we asked a nurse, because no doctors were really talking to us. And so we asked a nurse. I just said, hey, so I was told that, I wouldn't be here if it was just a seizure. So we assume there's something else, but we need to be inside of it. So what's going on? She said, well, they found a mass. And so that was the first thing that they told me. We found a mass.
What did you and your wife feel at that point? Because you still have a lot of unanswered questions, but was it fear, confusion?
So when something happens to me, so I think that people either fall out of the boat. Most people fall out on either anxious or anger when something hits them in the face, and so I'm the angry guy. So when life hits me in the face, I immediately just look around and say, okay, so what's next? What are we doing? And so
I'm smiling because I had coffee with you one time and I knew you were going to say the anger side. That one time I met you, I'm like, this is one of those dudes that's going to be like, you're in fight mode.
Yeah. And so met with the first doctor and they said, hey, so our scans, before that, I got a copy of my CD and then started my brain scan, and my appointment was weeks out. And so I started sending it to doctor friends, having them try and read my brain scan before I met with a doctor.
Trying to get answers.
And so go and meet with the doctor, and they told me, they said, hey, we believe it's a low-grade glioma where you will have an 88% survival rate. And so went into surgery believing that the type of brain cancer that I had was a low-grade glioma. Mm-hmm. Then went in, did brain surgery. It was about, I think, almost 8 hours. The brain surgery was. After they got as much of the tumor out as they could, they handed off to a robot. And so the robot goes in and does, because I had gone and done like a 3D MRI, to where they're asking you questions and they're like, all right, tap these fingers as you're answering and clicking on the blue, circle up there. And so that way they can understand. You've heard of people playing the piano while they're doing brain. So they're trying to make sure that, hey, we only want to cut out these things, but they were in my kind of minor coordination and that sort of thing. So they wanted to, try and keep as much as I could. It was in my left parietal, so it impacts the right side. So they do surgery. They hand it off to the robot. So the robot will do this micro shear and then zap it. And then and then that zap is to test if you have another seizure. That means if they cut again, you'll either die or become a vegetable. And so they hand that off, and for as long as it could, they would cut it, zap, cut, zap, until I had another seizure on the operating room table at like hour 8 or something like that.
Wow. Oh my goodness. How long after you had that seizure did you have this 8-hour surgery?
So that was also this amazing, I'll make it quick, because they thought it was a low-grade glioma. They're like, hey, you don't want to, this was in like, so that happened like the week before Thanksgiving. And so now a couple weeks later, so middle of December, early December, and they're like, hey, it's a low grade. They grow slow. So you're good. We can do surgery in the next, later next year, or, early Q1. And I was like, I'm not that type of guy who, wants to wait. I like getting my Christmas presents in October. So, so let's go ahead and try it. And so they said, sir, it can't be done. And I said, well, I got this God who just does stuff like this. It would be just like him to get me in. And so the lady said, sir, I've been here 27 years. It's never happened. I said, just try. And she said, sure. She called me back the next day and she goes, you're going to be having surgery. She goes, it's not done yet, but she goes, something that typically takes 3 to 4 weeks took 48 minutes yesterday. So she goes, so the second that it took 48 minutes, I knew this man's having surgery. And so she goes,
wow.
So I was able to get in on my son's birthday, unfortunately. December 19th, 2019, my son turned 19.
Oh man, that wasn't a very good Christmas present for him, or birthday present for him.
I told him, I said, I'm going to try and not get you death for your birthday.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Well, you came through on that one. But what did they find out then? They go in and they do that. And you come out and you find out it's a little more serious than a slow growing one, right?
Yeah. So I woke up and I felt amazing. Like it was, like, honestly, like I've woken up, worse from naps than that surgery.
You just had brain surgery and you wake up feeling amazing?
Genuinely. So hand to God, I turn to my wife. She's sleeping right there. I wake up and I go, oh my, babe, I hope the surgery went well, but I feel amazing. So let's get out of here and blow this popsicle stand and get a carne asada burrito at the closest, Filiberto's on the way home. And she burst into tears and just ran out of the room. And I'm checking for surgery breath to see what happened. And so she comes back in with the doctor. He had asked her, hey, when your husband wakes, come get me, because I kind of want to talk through. And so that's when they came in and they said that, hey, it's not a low grade glioma, but it's a high grade glioma. It's the grade 4 glioblastoma. So if the other one was a 98% or 88% survival rate, this one's a 98% morbidity rate.
Wow.
Within like 18 months is the median for that one.
Man, what an emotional roller coaster that'd be, because you wake up, you feel like you just had a great nap and things are taken care of and you want to go get a burrito, and she brings in the doctor to tell you you have something that has a 98% morbidity rate. Yeah. So what did you guys do with that?
Yeah, so my doctor was phenomenal. His name is Ekokobi Fonkum. He's from Cameroon. He, if you know who Francis Ngannou is, the UFC heavyweight champion, they grew up in the same village in Cameroon. Yeah, their moms are friends. Really cool. So he came in, told me the new diagnosis, and so I asked him, Is there a door number 2? And
Yeah.
he started chuckling. He goes, nope. And I said, well, then I say we open up door number 1 and kick it as hard as we can straight in the mouth. And he goes, honestly, he goes, you are already my favorite patient just on that, one thing. And so, yeah, so our friendship started there, but that was it. I mean, I wasn't, yeah, like I still didn't, I woke up with that and was like, I'm not gonna die. Like I'm not, I consider myself 4,000 It's this really weird thing. Like I've never lost in my life. And so like I woke up from brain cancer and was like, I guess this is the newest thing that I'm going to, that I'm going to beat.
Yeah. Did they have to bring you back into surgery? What did they have to do for the chemo? What did they?
So then I started doing chemo and radiation soon after that, but then got an infection in my surgical site, which I would have only found out. We were traveling to California for a work thing. Like I was still retired and stuff, or I was out, but my team was doing something, and they're like, "Hey, will you fly out just for a party?" And I was like, "Yeah." So my wife and I flew out, and we were laying on sheets that were white. And so I look in the morning, and I had this weird, stuff on the pillow, and it was from the surgical site. So went back in, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, so glad you got here in time. Had you had waited a day, you'd have died from the infection." So I had to go. So my bone flap. So they core your, they go in and do this, that size, and so they popped it out, and then they put it back in at the end. But everything had gotten so infected that
that's a phrase not many of us get to say. My
Yeah.
bone flap
My
is
bone
giving
flap.
me problems.
And so they took it out. They cut out everything that they could, and then had to throw the bone flap away as well. And so then I was on a PICC line for like
But wait,
6
back
months.
up. They throw your bone flap away. So the little chunk of your skull what do they
now it's mesh.
You just have a hole in the back of your head now?
Now it's a little mesh thing, which I was like,
and then does bone grow? Like, is it?
No,
you just,
no, it just stays there.
Okay,
So,
can I ask a crazy? if do you have like a soft spot in the back of your head?
No, so I haven't pushed hard enough to know.
Yeah, let's not do it on the podcast.
yeah, but maybe later.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay, so they go in like you were a day away from dying again.
Yep, and just crazy. When I get out, the doctor goes, "Hey, so in all seriousness, it's better that you got the infection." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "No, like it actually kicks up your immune system. And so for chemo and radiation, you'll be in a better place. And statistically, patients who get an infection in their surgical site do better." And so I'm like, okay, so now I'm thanking the Lord for, for an infection, right?
Yeah.
So I had to pause chemo and radiation while I had that infection until I could get my white blood cells up. And then went back, did the max amount you could do for radiation. So I can't do any more radiation. When I finished, I went in. So the day before
And when
surgery,
you say you finished, how long was that? Was that a couple of months?
I think it was 27 treatments. Yeah, so I think it was 6 months of chemo, and
if it's the maximum, where you just was it just kicking your butt? Like doesn't.
Yeah, so it's what they say, it's compounding. So each time you go in, it kind of zaps you and then drops you a little bit lower. So, at the end of the time, you're kind of at the lowest. And the same thing with chemo. And so at the end of that period was pretty rough.
Wow.
But I went in, so the day before, so we've done funny Christmas cards for like a decade or so. And so the day before we went in for surgery, we did our Christmas card that was WWE that year. And so I was a Macho Man Randy Savage, and I had 2 belts because I had skin cancer like 13 years ago. And so my second belt, so I had 2 belts, one for each cancer.
So you defeated skin cancer and brain cancer.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so went and rung the bell in my Randy Macho Man outfit, and so all the doctors were blessed. Everyone was blessed by having this guy who was, running around, pumping everyone up in a Randy Savage, outfit.
Yeah. So December 19th, you come out of that first surgery, you have that first surgery.
Yeah.
And, thank God you were able to give your son that present of not dying.
Yeah.
When was it that you ring the bell then of having the 2 belts? Is that about a year later?
Probably a May-ish or something like that, so May of the next year, finished all that. And then I went back to work.
Did you really?
Yeah. It was, yeah. So it was really cool. My company, Danish company, 500,000 employees, but just ISS, great company, and they had made a position for me. I was the vice president of operations for North America, and so I used to have to, so I had like $5 million signing authority to where I could, without
You didn't have to and get
calling
approval.
our CEO, I could write
Yeah.
a $5 million
Yeah.
check. And so when they came out, they said, hey, like we met with legal, we met with doctors, we met with a bunch of people, and they don't think that it would be wise for you to remain in that role.
Well, you didn't have a brain flap.
I don't have a brain flap. Right? And so I totally understood it, but it was one of those things. I'd been an operator since I was 21. It was the only job in that one. I was only in one field my entire life, and I only had one job, operations. Now I started as a supervisor and then ended as a vice president, but that's all I did was operations forever. And so they're like, hey, can you train people? And I was like, sure, but like like people go to school to train, and so so I did that for a bit, and I was had the chance. I was kind of mentoring this young woman from Denmark. She was one of our management trainees for years, and she was like, "Why are you still working?" And I was like, "Because that's just what you do." And she's like, "But like, have you talked to see like you probably qualify for disability? Like there's some different things. Have you checked?" And I was like, I have not thought once about, and so that caused me to go home and talk to my wife about it, pray about it, and then go to the family about it. And so then I retired a couple months later.
Wow. Man, what a journey. Did that change your thinking? Because again, I'm assuming, I had a friend once who was diagnosed with cancer and told he was dying. And I remember he told me a story about when someone came to him and said, what does it feel like knowing you're going to die?
Oh, yeah.
And his response was, what does it feel like pretending you're not?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Because we're all going to die. We're all dying, if you will.
One
but
out of
there's
one.
still got to be something different. And I'm guessing, because I haven't been in this situation, there's still got to be something different when you're told this is a 98% chance you're going to die from this.
Yeah. So what was amazing was, so my doctor, Dr. Fonkum, said, hey, so I split my time between treating patients and then coming up with a cure for this disease. And we really think we're close. And so I'm asking you he had just finished a white paper on essentially faith. And that, if you believe that you're going to live, you live longer. And if you believe that you're going to die, you die quick. And so
he wrote
said,
a paper on that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, and so that was, the first thing he told me, and I said, well, I'm in. And so I go, so you guys are close. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, so I'm going to put you on this drug cocktail. And I go, drug cocktail. I go, that's what Magic Johnson was on, so,
Mhm.
so, then I go, hey, so Magic was on a drug cocktail until they figured out how to cure it. And
and for our audience that may not know,
yeah,
when Magic Johnson was diagnosed with HIV/AIDS,
Yep.
it was a death sentence back then.
Everyone.
Like it was everyone died.
Oh yeah, yep.
And so they put him on this drug cocktail.
Yeah.
Because there was no cure or thing, and that kept him alive until they got that.
Yep.
So you were told they had something similar with this.
Yep. So take this drug cocktail and we'll keep working on your thing. And then you can be the Magic Johnson of glioblastoma, but minus the adultery. So, and so that was and is my belief until this second right now, and continues to believe is I believe that the doctors will get it, and I will be an old man who had a cancer scare when I was 40-something years old.
Yeah.
But
they still don't have one yet, but they're
not.
working on it. And you're on a drug cocktail that...
Yeah, it's just weird things. So none of them are like cancer treating. They just put my body in the best place. So like one of them is like for diabetics because it does something with blood sugar. And so tumors feed off sugar. And so having less blood sugar overall is good. Another one's antibiotic that they just say, hey, for whatever reason, this keeps people in a better place. So I'm doing that. The drug that he just called me a couple weeks ago and said, the drug we just tested on a bunch of mice killed all of the tumors and all of the female mice and half of the tumors in the male mice. And so I said, all right, so that proves that, men are more stubborn than women, and, and that you need to get back in the office. And so he said, yeah, dude, like we are working nonstop. And so he goes, so I love calling you and giving you good news because then you pump me up, and then I run back to the lab and say, "Hey, Wade Lewis is doing great, but he wants to see his daughter walk down the aisle. So guys, get back to it."
How old is your daughter?
17.
17.
Yeah, and then my boys are 21 and 23.
Yeah. So when we met for coffee, we were talking about that because we were talking about how amazing it is having adult children. I have adult children. You have them now, and it's just a really fun stage of life. Yeah. But you wouldn't have experienced that if you would have actually died from this those years ago. So you're experiencing things that you weren't supposed to, in a sense.
Yeah, and at this age, so rewind. So my son would have been 19, 17, and then my daughter would have been like 13. And so at 13, 17, and 19, all your kids still think you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And so
you live long enough where they're going, Dad's pretty smart.
Yeah. And so now 4 years, forward, my kids are both in the, professional world, and they're asking me for job advice. My friends are hiring, stuff like that. And they're like, "Oh, you actually do have value in life." And my 17-year-old's just picking that up in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah. That's funny, because if you would have passed away on their night, they would have always been like, "We love Dad." But it just wasn't very.
What a dum-dum.
And you live long enough to prove that you actually are a smart guy. So you told me, though, when we met that first time, that in some ways you look back and you're glad this happened because it changed the trajectory of your life in some ways. So speaking of that. Hey, from your No Gray Areas team, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. And if you're loving this episode, would you just take a moment and leave us a review and rating on whatever platform you're listening from? If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on the new podcast episodes that drop every other Wednesday. By leaving a review and subscribing, you help others discover our podcast's inspirational messages to effectuate positive change in their lives. Okay, let's jump back into this episode. That in some ways you look back and you're glad this happened because it changed the trajectory of your life in some ways. So speaking of that.
Yeah. And this is one of the hardest things for people to believe. So I wouldn't take brain cancer away. I am a better father, husband, friend, cousin, brother, everything right now. And I wasn't trending in that direction. Like I had really, the world's tough, the world is tough, and the business world. And so, and for me, I had believed too much of the Western, philosophy of, hey, this is, you got to go do the most stuff and accomplish and get to that highest place on the mountain. You wanted to be president, when you were a little kid, and now it's, got to be CEO of the biggest company you can find. And so I look back and I say, "Oh Lord, thank you so much for, allowing this brain cancer, but for it to not take me, because the last 4 years have been the best 4 years of my life."
Yeah. What were some of the things that changed for you? I mean, you hinted on one of them, just your priorities, right?
Yeah.
Like your priorities changed.
Yeah.
What would be some other things that changed where you could, like, that's a huge statement to go, "I thank God for my brain cancer. I thank God that I didn't die from it." But what else changed?
Yeah. So, come home from the hospital, and we had a rule in our house. It was called the Spotify rule. And it was just anytime that we're eating, especially breakfast, cereal, that sort of thing, I don't need to hear you horse chomping. So just put Spotify on and we'll just have music playing for breakfast, right? You're not a horse. I don't need to hear you horse chomp, right? So I'm shuffling out the first day after getting home, and the kids are out there eating cereal or whatever. And so I sit down, and then I start eating, and then one of them notices that, that Spotify's not on, and they go, "Oh, hey, Dad, so sorry, we'll hop up and get Spotify on." And then I was like, "Oh, no, hold on. The Spotify rule's dead, because if I can hear you chomp and you can hear me chomp, then everything else past that is gravy." So that rule is dead. And Spotify was even my customer at the time. And I was like, "So Spotify rule's dead. We can still subscribe to it, but it doesn't need to be on."
That's crazy.
Because and then the same thing a couple weeks later.
So just really quick. So what was a pet peeve of yours now was something that you treasured. I can
Same thing
hear
as the
them
hair.
chewing, so I know I'm alive.
I used to complain every time I walk into the front bath and my kids would comb their hair in there and there'd be all this hair in the front sink, right? And I'm like, come on, and then I walk in, I'm like, whoa, like my kids live with me.
Yeah.
They're alive. I'm alive. They have full heads of hair. I have full head, no, I'll be picking this up and cleaning it
Did
and
you
not
talk about the
saying a
full head
word.
of hair to make me feel bad?
Yeah, sorry about that.
So you were going to say what else? Then a couple weeks later, something else.
No,
happens.
yeah, that was a couple weeks later, and I'm in the front bathroom looking at this sink of hair, and I'm like, oh no, I will, never again say,
Yeah.
complain about that. So
Yeah.
it was just those things that you take for granted, and so it really is. So you talked about the death thing earlier. So 180,000 people a day die globally, more or less. And then 150 people a year die from coconuts falling and hitting them on their head. And so you get this. And so that's your buddy asked a great question, because when I went home and started talking to people about my situation, I was like, well, I mean, technically you could die before me, like just because,
Yep.
a doctor told me that, like, 180,000 people a day die and 150, a year
From
from
coconuts.
coconuts. And so they did everything. They watched what they ate. They saved up the money. They took the time off. They did everything. They sit down, they order their Mai Tai, and then
Yeah.
boom,
Yeah.
and they're talking to their maker. And so for me, it was like, yeah, like less has changed. Like really, less has changed than I really thought. Because the only thing that's changed for me was, now I have a little bit of proprioception. I have to watch stairs when I walk up and down stairs. Wherever they cut in my brain, it disconnected that, and I can't get it back.
So is it like a balance thing? Like,
So it's not balance. It's actually, so my right side's the impacted thing, my impacted side. So I don't know how high my right foot's off the ground right now. It could be an inch, it could be, whatever.
really?
And so stairs. So like the first time I went to do a stair, I kicked the stair like really hard, and I was like, what? And then over and over, and then I'm like, oh wow. And so it just doesn't.
So you have to actually watch your
I have
foot.
to watch my
Yeah.
foot.
Yeah.
So, and I've got a
Interesting.
friend who, when she had glioblastoma surgery, she does weightlifting, competitive weightlifting. She has to watch her right arm, like go gadget arm. So she looks at it and says, fire, 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 as she's bench pressing.
Wow.
And it's still to this day, so like there are some
Wade,
things.
that's just a little side note really
Yeah.
quick, but doesn't it make you realize how many things that we take for granted to be
Oh.
like there's so much that we could thank God for that don't even cross our mind.
Oh yeah.
I don't know that I've ever thought when I walk upstairs going, wow, thank God that my foot knows exactly how high to go.
Yep.
Until it's taken from you.
The first thing that I found out that was lost was teeth brushing. So I'm in the hospital. I go to brush my teeth after surgery, and I go in. And I just like rack the side of my cheek or whatever with my toothbrush, and I'm like, what? And then I try and go back, and I like slam my gums on this side, and I'm like, what is happening? And so long story short, I got into this thing called mirror box training.
Yeah.
Where
I've watched a documentary on it.
Which is for veterans and that sort of
Yep.
thing. And so I had to go and watch myself brush my teeth until my new neural pathways were connected, and then it's back. So it was like riding a bike.
They've done with that mirror boxing, which is fascinating. Is this, tell me if I'm wrong on this,
Yep.
like someone who's lost an arm
Yep.
and they'll have that fantasy itch,
Yep.
but then they'll scratch, but it's the other arm.
Yep.
But your brain thinks it's scratching the fantasy.
Yep. Yeah.
It's crazy how that is.
It's nuts. And so this arm, I wasn't able to do this coming out of surgery. It was like, it was off, right? And so I had to stick this one in the box and then do it with this one. But then it looks like I'm doing it with my right hand,
But your
which is
brain
my
then
bad
is-
hand. And so my brain's now connecting. So after a couple weeks of mirror box, I'm back. I'm right, like, and so, yeah, again, for me, I'm like, oh, so not only like how complex our bodies are, but, how able to, to be healed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so that was the priorities was a big difference for you, right?
Yeah.
Like just like you thought you needed to be president. And then if it's not president, then it's the CEO or whatever's the highest. And that just wasn't a big priority for you anymore.
Yeah, it was one of those things to where I looked at, I then kind of really dropped to that verse in James where it talks about, you don't say that I'm going to do this or that tomorrow. Say, if the Lord wills, I'll do this or that
Yeah.
tomorrow. And so for me, I was like, okay, so what is guaranteed for Wade Lewis? It's today. I mean, it's right now. It's this, and so I started like just going and just looking at my day and saying like, Lord, if you gave me, another day, here's what I'll do with it. And I'll be intentional with every meeting. And so I'll, sit there, and before I go out to have breakfast, I'll pray about breakfast, and Lord, bring something, for the kids and I to conversate about it, and so it was just this very intentional. Yeah. I was so caught
huge.
up.
That is huge. Well, I'm sure if you're working like the level that you were in a company like that, you're always thinking of the future, and
10 years out.
we miss the moments we have. Like, you can't go relive the past, and you're not guaranteed tomorrow. What we do have is this moment.
Yeah.
And so you're saying you got really good at just treasuring that moment.
Yes. And it took years. There is something like, I like being in the boardroom. I like having power and being a power broker. I like making decisions. I like, and so with that, comes this, well, you only focus, on the big things. And then, even Andy Stanley, only do what only you can do. Right. Okay, well, then if I'm this guy up here, then I can only do these big strategic things. And so, and then it was like, well, no, like that was just something you were telling yourself. You can also go on a walk with your wife, and that can be the most, that can be as satisfying as, as buying a new company.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Wade, one of the things that when we had coffee together that first time and we were talking, and I think you can help our audience with this one too, we all have a friend, family member, someone that's close to us that goes through something really difficult, or they're given some really bad news, and they're in this grieving process. To help us understand what to say and what not to say, or what was helpful or what was not helpful for you, because sometimes people don't say anything, and that can be really hurtful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have that happen to you?
I did, and it was one of those things to where, fast forward through the situation, I totally get it, because I had had things in my life where I didn't know what to say, and I didn't want to make it worse, so I didn't say anything, not knowing that would actually make it worse. And so I've had 4 best friends since I was the last edition when I was 10. So in the 4th grade. So
you've known them since 4th grade.
Known them since 4th grade, and so so I had these guys that were able to come in, and so we kind of all went through it together, and we had the book of Job to tell us, what not to do. And so my biggest thing was like, I knew all the Bible verses, oh wait, have hope. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think and so like. So the only thing that Job's friends should have done, was come in sackcloth and ashes, just sit there and just be there. And if I want to say something, I'll say something, and if I want to ask you guys, I'll ask a question. But other than that, just sit there, just mourn. There's no, Tim Keller always says, no pat answers. Don't, this is big.
That's sometimes the worst thing, isn't it?
Oh gosh, well, just try, do you not think I'm trusting in the Lord? Of course I am, but there's also this, what happened? Like that, did I do something? Like just trying to figure out, get your bearings. And so during that time, it's nice to be able to, just do that. And then some of the things that, that well-meaning, people try and do. So the meal train, right? Which is probably a benefit for most people. A friend of mine, unfortunately, just lost a son a week ago, a week and a half ago on New Year's Eve. 14-year-old son. Now he's with Christ, and so it's but a meal train works perfect for them, and they felt so blessed. He was telling me, it's such a blessing for us. My wife's a vegetarian. The doctors told me to come out and do keto, and then I had 3 teenagers. So each time a family was trying to bring us something, it was like this crazy, like, it was hard for them. And then they were like apologetic sometimes, like, I've never cooked keto, I've never done this, I've never cooked that, and so it was this.
You didn't want to say it, but you're like, I can tell you've never cooked it.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah. You know what? Actually, it would have been better. would just be, maybe a gift card somewhere, or just a conversation. But there were just things. And so, for us, as we've processed and helped people through sorrow, you want to do the platinum rule as opposed to the golden rule. So the golden rule is do unto others as you would, have done to you, and I was like, okay, cool. But the platinum rule is do unto others as they would want done to themselves, and so you have to be empathetic and say, okay, what does this family need? Not that what does my family need, but if I were them, what would I need? And so it's a very different question. Yeah.
That is. And I heard you before talking about just the value sometimes, like with Job's friends. If you don't know what to say, sometimes the right thing is nothing.
Yeah.
But your presence. Just your presence.
That's
right?
the thing. Yeah. And so even any text that I send to somebody in trauma and who's hurting, there's no questions asked. I'm just leaving this for you. And I want to be clear. You don't ever need to respond to it. You don't even have to heart this. You don't have to do any. I'm just trying to lay something beautiful and sweet at your feet that if you ever get hungry or thirsty or anything, you can pick up and eat, but I don't want to force anything on you.
Yeah. We had someone on our podcast about a year and a half ago whose wife had committed suicide. She ended up struggling with she had blood clot issues after her, and it was because of the birth of their fifth child.
Oh, wow.
But we talked to him about this, and he really went deep into like, what do you say, what you don't say. But one of the things that he suggested is he's going, sometimes just I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't definitely not questions.
Yeah.
Don't give the little pat answers.
Yeah.
Just I'm so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But he also talked about the importance of presence, like you did. And I suppose depends on where you're at in someone's life on whether you have that right. But he told the story of a friend of his that gives me emotional telling it, but pulled into the driveway that day and said, texted him, said, I'm down in my car and I'm going to stay overnight in my car. And if you need anything tonight, just come out.
Yeah.
But it was just his presence. He was just saying, hey, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so powerful. And it's hard because we always want to say something. That's why you have to go to Toastmasters to cut out your filler words and all that, because uncomfortable silence is the worst. Yeah. We think it's the worst until you're in it, and then, man, I could just sit in my garage with another friend and just cry, not say anything. And just with him there, that just meant the world to me.
That happened with you?
Yeah. And there was one day where nobody answered. So, you have great friends, but they all have jobs, right? And so I had called. So it was at the end of chemo and radiation, and I'm at the lowest place that I've been in this entire journey. So again, surgery was, came out feeling amazing. And so it was chemo and radiation that really took me to the bottom. And it was, on the last day, so just the worst feeling. I call, and all of my friends are busy, which again, they all have jobs, right? And then it was, so I'm calling everyone, nothing. And then I'm just crying. So I'm throwing up from the chemo. And I'm in my garage, and then all of a sudden I pick up the Bible and I start reading. I'm in the Psalms, and then I close my eyes and I have kind of this vision of being in this cave, and the cave was completely dark, and I was just walking, and I had my hands on the side of the cave to make sure that I, wasn't running into anything. And then all of a sudden, I touch, and I go back there and I touch this thing, and I taste it, and it's the sweetest honey that I'd ever tasted in my entire life. And I felt a peace and a comfort. I went from the lowest place in my life to the sweetest, thing that's happened to me in years, just, that quick. And so it was,
and that was on the other end of none of your friends.
Yeah. Not being able to pick up. And so it was one of those things to where,
in this place of solitude in a powerful way.
Yeah. And so, friends are great, but they're also not always there. And so having something else is a cornerstone, something to lean on is great.
Well, Wade, to wrap up our conversation, when we talk about the power and complexity of human choice, what would you say to me, our audience? And I'm going to use your words, or not your exact words, but similar to what you said, we didn't get the privilege
Yeah.
of being diagnosed with cancer and told that you have a 98% chance of dying. Now, I'm only saying privilege because you're
Yeah.
saying I
Yeah.
wouldn't trade it. What would you suggest to us? So we don't have that, but like
Yeah.
you and I both said, we're none of us know how long we have.
Yeah. Yeah. So it really is. So one of the things that I kind of used to say even before this, I used to say all of life is a screening tool. Um, Meaning like when somebody does something, that's like everything is a screening tool. And so for me, looking at this after, like it stripped down identity. Like for me, it just took me to what do you living your eulogy essentially. So
Mm.
unfortunately, I eulogized four grandparents and my mom before the age of 30.
Wow.
And so, a lot of being around death and, and that sort of thing. And so after this thing, it was like, so I had spent time making up. And so, cause there were a couple things, so relationships that I had to go back and fix, an old boss that maybe I quit the wrong way or something like that. And so I spent like the first 6 months to a year, after diagnosis of, making up for those things. And then I wrote on my whiteboard, living your eulogy, to where like you don't want to have to, fix a bunch of stuff. And so live
Living
each
your
day.
eulogy.
Yeah, living your eulogy.
Gosh, I
And so
like that.
living it to where like I want that said about me when I die. And so like, well, then how do you do that?
Yeah.
You have to live it. You
Yeah.
literally can't have a eulogy. So I had to lie in a eulogy that I did. Because one of my grandparents, I won't say who, was pretty rough. And so
I think there's a
um,
lot of lying at funerals
yeah.
sometimes, right?
Oh, it's really rough.
Oh,
I mean, it
yeah.
was rough. And so my grandfather came up to me afterwards and said, he had divorced her, by the way, in the 70s. You don't, what I mean? So
Yep,
that
yep.
says something, right? So anyways, I had to cut all the stories off. So I'm telling stories about her, and then I had to cut the story off before she grabbed a newspaper and hit me in the face,
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I come down from the eulogy, and he goes, "Boy, those were the most amazing words anyone has said about your grandfather. Most of them weren't true, but you did what you had to do." And that was like,
Yeah.
I didn't like that. Like I
Yeah.
was like probably 25 at that. And I was like, that'd be horrible. And so after brain cancer, it's just been like this, no, live each day to where like, if you died at the end of the day, you'd be like, oh yeah, no, I died on a high note. That was the
Yeah.
greatest way that I could have
Yeah.
spent one day.
Yeah. Wait, I think that's so good. I had heard a while ago that everybody will be boiled down to about one sentence, given enough time after their death.
Yeah.
They'll eventually be forgotten,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
by
Yeah. Yeah.
family. Like my great grandkids won't even know my name.
Yep.
But it won't be long after I die where my wife will say, Pat, he was such a,
Yeah.
my kids will say, Pat, he was such a,
Yeah.
someone who worked with me say, Patrick was such a, so living your eulogy is finish that sentence,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
live that way. So
Yeah.
what do you want your wife to say about you? And then treat her in such a way that that's what she's going to say, right?
Yeah.
That's living your eulogy.
That's it.
Gosh, that is so powerful. That is so good. Well, man, Wade, thank you so much for sharing some of your story. And it fits just perfectly with what we talk about with no gray areas and living our life with the power and complexity of human choice. We're going to jump into the two truths and a lie, but really quick little side note. We don't have a lot of time with this, but I got to jump on this because when we met and we were having coffee, you talked about something you always told your kids, that your home was a fail factory.
Oh, yes.
And I'm like, bro, when we do our podcast, I got to ask you about that because if my kids were still at home, I would steal that from you and I would be telling them the same thing.
Yep.
Unpack that.
Yes, very quickly. So our kids from age 15, 16 on, you have to be in school, working or volunteering at least 40 hours a week. You can't soup up a civic, we say. You have to save 50% of your paychecks that don't get touched until you launch. And we'll give you a car, from this stage to this age. But we want you to go out and fail as many times as you need to figure out, what you want to do, all that sort of thing. But we said we want you to fail, and we want it to ruin your day, your week, or even your year, but not your life. And so in that lean startup type thing. And so we just, we started doing that with the kids, where they come in and be like, Dad, I kind of think I want to do fast food, and I'm like, so here, here are the things about fast food, I doubt also, okay, sounds good, and then let them do it. And then when they come back, well, remember, we don't leave one job without having the next job, and so if you have to work 40 hours a week, all this stuff. So what are you going to do? Oh gosh, I shouldn't have done this. Oh, okay. Well, so you failed at this and then you want to move forward. And so it is, they hated it when they were young. My 23-year-old couldn't stand it. He got his first paycheck and it was $68. And he goes, so 60, so I'm going to come up with $30. This is insane, all this stuff. So he's 23. He bought a house last year at 22, paid off car, like all this stuff. And he came and he said, Dad, you should have started that when we were 5 with our allowance, and so it was this very cool thing to where, it's been a long, how long is that? 8 years we've been doing this, but it's produced some good fruit thus far.
Oh man. And I love the fact of in doing that, you're letting your kids know, like, it's okay to fail. Like, we're going to fail in life, but it's that adage of fail fast and fail forward,
fail lean,
make a failure that's going to affect you for a day or a week, a month, maybe even a year, but not something that's going to affect you in your life. What a great place for a home to create a culture and environment to say, it's okay to fail, but let's.
Yeah, because you're loved. You're not what you're producing today. Like, you're loved. We just want them to feel this, hey, you're loved. And so go out and fail, because your failure doesn't take away from what your mother and I think of you. All it does is reduce something that, you didn't want to do, or you now know that you do want to do, whatever it is, you learn something. And so, and if you can do that in a safe environment, it's really fun.
Some of the best parenting advice, and I've heard a lot of parenting advice. I'm a reader. I've read a lot of books on parenting. But that is some of the best I've ever heard. That's why I'm like, if I could go backwards in time, I would adopt that. I love that, and I would encourage our audience, if you have kids or going to have kids or they're still at home right now, take that, a fail factory. Make it a place where your kids can fail. They know they're loved, and hopefully their failures affect a day or a week, but not their life.
Yeah. What's funny is, so when they move out, they get all their money and they move out. And we've told them, hey, if you have to move back in, it actually bumps up to 75% of your savings, because 50 obviously wasn't enough, because you're back in my bed. You're back in my house.
I like it. I like it. Okay, my friend, we do this. It's always fun at the end. It's ironic because we're no gray areas, but I want you to give me 2 truths and a lie, 3 statements.
All right.
I'm on a winning streak right now,
okay.
by the way.
The first thing is, when I was 10 years old, I won a life-size Voltron. Remember Voltron? Mm-hmm. I have also had to yield to an F-18 fighter jet. And I once had a roommate who was in the Italian mafia.
Ooh, those are good ones. Wow. I'm going to say the third one is true.
The third one's true?
Yeah, the mafia.
Mafia is true?
Yeah. I don't know why. I was just like, if there's anybody who's going to have a mafia roommate, it's going to be Wade Lewis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now I got a 50-50 chance. I think that you had to yield to an F-18.
I did.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
You're still going.
Yeah, I still have it. I went with that one because I had to yield because my son's in the Marine Corps.
Yep.
And I've had to yield to some planes, but
it's
not a fighter jet. It is amazing.
So we pulled up to a 4-way stop.
Yeah.
It was at NASA, Edwards Air Force Base, NASA, Dryden out there.
Yeah.
That was my account when I was like 26 or something like that. And pull up to a 4-way stop. And I got there just before the F-18. But in flight line training, you learn you always have to yield to that. And so when we pulled up, I motioned him, here, go.
Yeah.
And he just starts dying laughing in his cockpit.
Thank you. Yeah.
You go immediately to jail if you don't,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. Anybody that has not been on military bases, they don't know. Like, that's just part of life on a military basis. You come up to a flight line and you're
Yeah.
yielding for these jet fighter planes or Apache helicopters.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. But, well, Wade, thanks so much for sharing your story. Really, really appreciated having you on here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Pat. Yeah, really appreciate everything that that you and the podcast are doing for people who need it.
Yeah. What a moving episode. Thank you for joining us on today's episode with Wade Lewis. May Wade's incredible journey inspire you to embrace gratitude and intentional living in your own life. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, remember that every day you wake up is a gift.